Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into one of the most pivotal, maybe the most pivotal 24 hours in modern military history.
Yeah.
June 6th, 1944.
But we're doing something different today.
We are. We're turning the camera around, shifting our perspective a full 180 degrees. We are not following the landing craft onto Utah or Omaha Beach.
No.
We are standing instead in the cold concrete bunkers and the dusty headquarters of the German High Command across France. We're watching the invasion unfold from their side.
And this deep dive, it's not really the story of the Allied landing. It's the story of the German realization.
Exactly.
Specifically, we're drawing very heavily today from the forensic analysis of military history compiled by the Hidden Front History Channel.
Right. Their work is phenomenal on this.
It really is. And they zero in on this painful paradox. The agonizing gap between the moment German officers received intelligence that was, for once, perfectly clear.
For once is right.
And the moment they were structurally authorized to actually act on it.
That time gap, that sliver of daylight between recognition and response, that's everything, isn't it?
It is the whole story.
Our mission today is to understand how intelligence, 100% accurate, definitive intelligence, became strategically irrelevant. We're focusing on that crucial time window, analyzing the clash between the clarity of reality and the utter incapacity for action.
And we begin with our initial scene, set just after 2.0 in the morning, 2 a.m. on June 6th.
It's pitch black.
It is. And we're inside a coastal observation post, a deep concrete bunker overlooking what the world would soon know as Omaha Beach. A field telephone rings.
And Major Werner Pluskat, staring into that pre-dawn gloom, starts getting these fragmented reports.
He sees the scale of what's coming begin to materialize in the mist, and eventually he speaks 3 words that they carry the weight of immediate, terrible clarity. He says, "Das ist es."
That is it. 3 simple words, and they confirm 2 years of German anticipation and preparation were simultaneously correct and tragically misdirected.
Yeah.
But for you, the learner, this raises the central critical question that drives this entire narrative. How did the Wehrmacht, often considered the most technologically and doctrinally advanced fighting force in Europe?
And they were.
Right. An army that had been anticipating this invasion for 2 years. How did it become utterly paralyzed, structurally incapable of moving its crucial reserves when the invasion finally arrived? It's a stunning, stunning failure of command.
To really appreciate the depth of the paralysis that seized the German command, you first have to understand the depth of their certainty leading up to June 6th. They hadn't just, vaguely expected an invasion. They had poured colossal amounts of material resources and psychological confidence into preparing for it in one specific, and to them, very logical place.
That investment was known, almost mythologically, as the Atlantic Wall. Tell us about the sheer scale of this undertaking, because it really speaks volumes about where their focus lay.
The Atlantic Wall was a project of enormous effort and, frankly, ego. It consumed 3 years of construction. It cost billions of Reichsmarks.
Billions. Money that could have gone elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Money that arguably should have gone into aircraft or mobile reserves. It comprised roughly 15,000 major fortifications, reinforced concrete bunkers, casemates, huge gun batteries.
Stretching all the way
From the tip of Norway all the way down to the Spanish border. They had 300,000 troops manning this defensive line. It was designed to be impregnable, a testament to static, fixed defense.
But the wall was only as strong as its weakest link. Or I guess as strong as the intelligence determining where the Allies would actually strike.
Exactly.
And the German general staff, they looked at their maps, and for them, the answer was it was obvious. Pas de Calais.
Absolutely. This was what they called the unassailable logic underpinning their entire defensive strategy.
And why Calais? What made it so obvious to them?
Well, 2 main reasons. First, geography. It offered the shortest sea crossing across the channel, just a few miles. That simplifies Allied logistics tremendously.
Less time on the water, less vulnerability.
Exactly. And second, strategic proximity. Calais was the closest point to the German industrial heartland, the Ruhr Valley.
The engine of their war machine.
The engine. So German operational doctrine dictated that the enemy, being, rational military professionals, would choose the shortest, fastest route to Germany's core capacity to maximize strategic impact. It was logical.
And their belief in this rationale was actively reinforced by Allied deception, wasn't it? Operation Fortitude.
Oh, massively.
This wasn't just a simple feint. It was a complex narrative the Allies built that perfectly fed into the German High Command's pre-existing biases.
It was a masterpiece of confirmation bias. The Allies created FUSAG, the first U.S. Army group, which was entirely fictional.
They put Patton in charge of it.
They put General George Patton in charge, a man the Germans both feared and respected immensely. They used fake radio traffic, dummy landing craft, even inflatable tanks to create this illusion of a massive invasion force gathering opposite Pas-de-Calais.
So every piece of fake data just confirmed what they already believed.
Precisely. Because the German staff wanted to believe the invasion would come there, every scrap of fake data simply confirmed their initial logical assumption. And the result was that the elite, mobile reserves, the best Panzer divisions, were deployed to defend the Calais sector.
So while they were braced for Armageddon at Calais, the reality 200 kilometers to the southwest in Normandy was, well, it was a whole different story.
A dramatically different story. Normandy was, in German military terms, the quiet sector.
A backwater.
It was explicitly designated a secondary defensive zone. And this is where we find General Erich Marcks commanding the 84th Corps based at St. Lo. And the irony is just bitter. June 5th was his 53rd birthday.
No way.
Yeah. He spent the evening toasting his officers, expecting another peaceful day, fully anticipating that if anything happened, it would be hundreds of kilometers away. The sound in his headquarters was the routine scratch of pens on paper, filing mundane reports.
And the quality of the troops stationed there reflects this low expectation. They weren't the fresh, elite Panzer Grenadiers.
No, far from it. The coastal defenses in Normandy, particularly those manned by the 716th Infantry Division, were filled with men in their 30s and 40s.
Older guys.
Older guys. They were often veterans, yes, but veterans recovering from crippling tours on the Eastern Front. Stalingrad, Kursk, heavy casualties.
Wow.
They were placed in Normandy because the German command saw it as a place where they could spend quiet months to heal or recover morale. It was a rehabilitation zone, not a fortress prepared to face the combined might of the Anglo-American war machine.
You also mentioned the composition of the defense was, it was further diluted by non-German personnel.
Yes, and this is critical. The crucial forward observation posts and coastal trenches were often manned by the Ost battalion.
Those battalions.
These were conscripted Poles, Russians, Georgians, and other captured Soviet personnel pressed into service to fill out the defensive lines.
So their loyalty was questionable at best.
Seriously questioned by the Wehrmacht command, but they served as bodies on the line. The critical detail here is that a front line held by older, wounded, and potentially disloyal troops is not a line you expect to face the largest amphibious invasion in history.
No. It speaks volumes about the German High Command's almost contemptuous dismissal of Normandy as a possible target.
It does.
But what about the actual intelligence? I mean, somebody must have been seeing something. We know Major Friedrich Hein, the intelligence officer at Marx's headquarters, he was filing accurate reports throughout May.
He was. The data was there.
It showed increased Allied reconnaissance flights, specifically over the Normandy coast, increased activity in ports like Plymouth and Southampton, and the suspicious quieting of that fake FUSAG radio traffic.
The raw data was flawless. Hein reported on it dutifully. But his analysis was immediately filtered through doctrine. When Hein's staff saw the increased flights over Normandy, their operational assumption wasn't, this is the target, it was.
This is the deception.
This is the feint working perfectly. They believed the Allies were drawing attention to Normandy precisely to make the Germans move those vital Panzer reserves away from the real target at Pas-de-Calais.
So their own intellectual adherence to this unassailable logic was their undoing. They saw the truth, but they had already built a framework that defined that truth as a lie.
Precisely. The source material from Hidden Front history emphasizes that in war, the most catastrophic mistakes are rarely made through a lack of data. They're made when everyone agrees on the interpretation of the data, reinforcing a dangerous assumption. That professional certainty fundamentally blinded them to the possibility of Allied strategic surprise.
They were prepared for the most rational attacks.
And the Allies delivered the most bold and unexpected one.
The invasion didn't start with a bang on the beaches then. It started with utter confusion and just disembodied noise in the darkness inland, right around 1.000000 in the morning.
Yes, this must have been a terrifying situation for the forward German commanders.
Yeah, that's can't imagine.
It was the tactical fog of war compounded by this deep structural disbelief. The first wave were the American and British airborne drops, and they were scattered widely across the Norman countryside, near places like St. Mary-Église.
So the initial reports reaching German headquarters were just a mess.
A complete mess.
Ugh.
Fragmentary, contradictory, and they made no tactical sense. Paratroopers were disorganized, their equipment didn't match known Allied unit designations, and reports were being cut off because the soldiers falling from the sky were also cutting telephone lines as they landed.
That created immediate bewilderment for the local commanders. We can look at Lieutenant Colonel Friedrich von der Heydt, who was commanding German paratroopers at Corentin.
Right. He's receiving these frantic calls from sentries, reporting small arms fire echoing through the hedgerows, American voices in the darkness, and communications just snapping. He couldn't draw a clear picture of what was happening.
And back at General Marks's headquarters in St. Lo, the staff officers are trying to manage this chaos.
They are. They're clustered around this large wall map, trying to place colored pins where the reports originated. But they struggled because the pattern violated every established German rule for effective airborne operations.
Oh, so?
It was just too vast, too widely dispersed, and too chaotic to be a mere prelude or a reconnaissance force.
Yeah.
It completely defied established German doctrine.
And Major Hain, the intelligence officer, now has to write a situation report on an event that, to him, defies reality.
Yes. And that psychological hurdle is fascinating. Hain had to use this carefully hedged language. Possible enemy airborne activity of undetermined scale.
He can't just say it.
He couldn't just write, the invasion is started, because the evidence was scattered and didn't fit the model. He was struggling with how to report something that shouldn't be happening according to every major strategic planning session held in the last 3 years. The weight of that doctrine was blocking the transmission of simple fact.
But the reality on the ground was escalating. What was the thing that shifted the needle from confusion to something more like certainty?
The introduction of gliders. Glider operations are non-recoverable, fixed commitment operations. They are designed to bring in actual heavy equipment, anti-tank guns, jeeps, mortars, and secure key objectives like bridges and crossroads.
A much bigger deal than just a few paratroopers.
A much bigger deal. When reports started confirming gliders landing, von der Heydt's assessment finally shifted. He spoke with a new, sharp urgency. He said, "Now, this is not reconnaissance. This is an operation. They are committing serious assets." The commitment level was just too high for a feint.
Yet, even as the inland commanders are starting to realize this, the coastal commanders are still in the dark. Right? They're still dismissing the noise as small-scale nuisance.
For a little while longer, yes.
Yeah.
But that changed violently around 5:45 in the morning.
This is when the true, horrifying clarity arrived.
It is. Major Werner Pluskat, the officer we met in the intro, was still in his 4-meter-thick concrete observation post above Omaha Beach. He had spent the preceding hours dismissing the fragments as, confused sentries seeing shadows. He was a professional, maintaining his vigil.
And then, the visual shock.
At 5:45, Pluskat raised his binoculars toward the channel. And the source material captures this moment perfectly. It describes him being frozen, just unable to process the scale of what he was seeing for 10 full seconds. The horizon had simply disappeared behind ships. The channel, which was previously a blank slate of gray water, was now solid steel.
Wow. That's such a powerful cinematic image that communicates the scale instantly. Not a small convoy, not a few destroyers.
An impossible armada.
But an impossible armada.
An armada stretching further than his optics could resolve. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and formations never before seen, and behind them, thousands upon thousands of landing craft moving toward the shore in endless, overwhelming waves.
So he gets on the phone.
He grabs the field telephone, his voice reportedly rising despite his training, trying to transmit this impossible reality. He yells, "There must be 10,000 ships out there."
And what was the immediate reaction from the inland command? From the staff officers who were still mentally locked onto the Pas-de-Calais deception?
Disbelief, instantaneous and sharp denial. The response came back from his regimental commander 15 kilometers inland. "Get hold of yourself, Pluskat. The Americans and British don't have 10,000 ships. You are seeing shadows and fog."
They couldn't conceive of it.
They simply could not conceive of the sheer material scale of the invasion force the Allies had assembled. Their professional doctrine had established an upper limit on Allied capability, and the reality just shattered that limit.
That denial was instantly rendered irrelevant by the physical reality of the naval bombardment.
Absolutely. The full weight of the Allied naval power descended. Shells began screaming overhead, 16-inch guns from battleships, 8-inch guns from cruisers. Destroyers moved in close, firing in support of the incoming infantry.
The bunkers must have been shaking.
Concrete dust and smoke filled the bunkers. Communication lines, which had survived the paratroopers, were now snapped by the percussion of the massive shells. This was the collective, undeniable moment of truth across the entire coastal defense.
This is not a drill.
This is not a drill. This is the main effort. The denial ended there. German officers, from Utah to Sword Beach, were staring at an invasion happening where they weren't supposed to be, delivered by a force they were told didn't exist. The staff realized that everything had just changed, and the war was now on their doorstep.
So by 7:00 in the morning, the chaos of those first few hours, all those fragments, had settled into an undeniable, terrifying picture back at General Marks's headquarters in St. Louis.
Yes. The situation reports were no longer guesses or scattered reports of small arms fire.
They had concrete confirmation from all 5 coastal sectors simultaneously.
Correct. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Landings confirmed across an 80-kilometer-wide front, and that range was critical, because it instantly negated the German belief that any landing would be concentrated at the narrowest point of the channel. The Allied forces were too dispersed to be a single, manageable attack.
The sheer calculated size of the operation must have just silenced the room, because this wasn't just an invasion, it was the invasion.
The numbers were overwhelming. Staff officers calculated the first wave strength at approximately 150,000 men. They had confirmation of over 5,000 naval vessels and initial estimates of more than 10,000 air sorties planned for the day.
So for General Max Pimsel's 7th Army headquarters, the strategic significance was immediate.
It was. This was not a feint. They knew this was larger than the invasion of Sicily. It was the single largest amphibious operation in military history.
That realization must have been the moment of doom. The quiet observation you mentioned earlier. We don't have the forces to stop this.
That phrase reflects the sudden, brutal clarity of it all. Germany had scattered its available forces too thinly across the Atlantic Wall.
And the good troops were somewhere else.
And the elite reserves were sitting 200 kilometers away, waiting for a ghost invasion at Calais. The troops in Normandy were the second and third string. They were already defeated by the enemy's material superiority and strategic surprise before the first landing craft even touched sand.
Meanwhile, inland, the armor commanders were confirming that this was the Schwerpunkt, the main effort.
Right. Major Hans von Luck, commanding a Panzer reconnaissance battalion east of Caen, was listening to radio chatter describing British tanks pushing inland.
And he knew.
Von Luck was a professional. He knew armor doctrine. When he heard reports of high-mobility British forces bypassing the coastal defenses and moving rapidly inland, he knew exactly what that meant. Forget the debates about Calais. The main effort, the decisive point, was right here, right now on the Normandy coast. He immediately tried to rally his command to move.
But the ultimate tactical reality that defined those first few hours, and really the whole campaign, was the Allies' complete control of the sky.
Total air supremacy. The Luftwaffe was non-existent. They couldn't get a single reconnaissance aircraft over the channel to confirm Pluskat's claims or assess the true depth of the invasion.
So they were tactically blind.
Completely flying blind. And simultaneously, Allied naval gunfire was systematically dismantling the static defenses the Germans had spent years building. The Atlantic Wall, built to withstand infantry and small arms fire, was being pulverized by 16-inch shells delivered with pinpoint precision.
It was a failure of combined arms for Germany.
Yeah.
Their land force was being annihilated by sea and air, and they had no response.
Exactly. The intelligence was crystal clear, but the means to act on it were utterly compromised.
So by 8 in the morning, we reached this moment of peak organizational clarity. General Erich Marcks at St. Lo knew what he had to do.
Yes. He reached for the telephone to call von Rundstedt's headquarters. The initial chaos was gone. Only grim certainty remained.
And that call at 8 a.m. was the final confirmation.
It was. Marcks, steady and professional, spoke the 3 words that had now traveled from the observation post to the corps commander. Das ist es. The invasion has started. The location was certain, the scale was certain, the strategic importance was certain.
And this is the height of irony, isn't it? The intelligence system, flawed as it was by all that confirmation bias, had finally delivered perfect, accurate information to the senior command staff in France within hours of the first landings. They knew exactly what they faced.
Perfect clarity. But that clarity, as we are about to see, was about to run straight into a systemic, bureaucratic brick wall designed by the Führer himself.
General Marks's definitive call went to the staff of Field Marshal von Rundstedt, commanding Army Group West near Paris. And von Rundstedt's staff, They also understood the implications instantly.
Oh,
They
good.
knew what needed to happen immediately.
Which was release the critical mobile reserves.
The Panzers.
These were the tide-turning assets, the forces with the training and mobility to drive the invasion back into the sea before the Allies could consolidate. Specifically, the 12th SS Panzer Division, the Hitler Youth, and the elite Panzer Lehr Division. These divisions were poised, loaded, and ready to go.
But they couldn't move. And this is the central point of failure, the structural disaster that defined the day. Why couldn't von Rundstedt, the supreme commander in the West, simply issue the order?
Because of the Führerprinzip, the leader principle, taken to its lethal extreme. This was compounded by personal paranoia and a catastrophic structural reform.
Yes, break that down.
The vital Panzer reserves, the only mobile counterpunch Germany had, could not be released without explicit permission from the OKW, the Armed Forces High Command, in Berlin.
And that permission was impossible to get because
OKW wouldn't wake Adolf Hitler.
That sounds like a dark joke. But it's a critical military reality. Hitler had taken sleeping pills the night before and left strict instructions not to be disturbed.
It's true. His personal routine and rest schedule superseded the largest military crisis of the Western Front.
It's surreal.
That's the surreal core of the issue. The words, "This is it," echoed urgently across command posts in France, but they were rendered utterly meaningless because the final authorization lay with a man 1,000 kilometers away who was, quite literally, asleep.
Okay, but I have to ask. I understand the ultimate authority rested with Hitler, but these were battle-hardened, high-ranking officers. Rommel, von Rundstedt, Pemsel. Why didn't anyone, simply move those tanks at 8:30 a.m. and apologize later?
Yeah.
Argue strategic necessity. What was the actual penalty for initiative?
And that's where the German military culture and the Führerprinzip converged so fatally. German military tradition, rooted in Prussian discipline, emphasized rigorous obedience over personal initiative.
But to this degree?
Well, after the catastrophic losses at Stalingrad and Kursk, and amid growing internal paranoia about political dissent, Hitler had tightened control to an impossible degree.
So what did that mean practically for a commander like von Rundstedt? Let's say he moves the tanks.
It meant that if von Rundstedt moved the Panzer Lehr Division, and the invasion turned out to be a feint, which, remember, was still the official OKW line until definitive proof arrived, he would have weakened the actual shore punct at Calais.
Oh.
He would not just face dismissal. He would face court-martial and possible execution for undermining the Führer's strategic vision.
So the system was designed to prevent any officer from taking major initiative.
Exactly. It ensured all loyalty and decision-making power flowed upward. The risk of inaction was military defeat. The risk of unauthorized action was death. They chose inaction.
Major Wilhelm Meyer, an operations officer at 7th Army Headquarters, he described the scene as utterly surreal.
He did. He spoke of sitting in an office where every detail was known, the enemy locations, the required troop movements, the needed ammunition, but their hands were tied.
Urgent voices on the phone detailing the disaster.
Officers standing over maps with movement orders drafted, ready to go, but unable to send the command. Meyer noted that the accurate words, "This is it," were completely meaningless without authorization from a man asleep.
And you have to think about the frustration of the tank crews themselves. Lieutenant Colonel Helmut Ritken, waiting impatiently with his Panzer battalion, received the message that cemented the catastrophe.
Remain in position. Await further instructions.
Imagine being an armored commander, a specialist in rapid mobile warfare, hearing the naval guns thunder 20 kilometers away.
Knowing the exact maneuver that needed to be executed to block the coastal exit roads.
And being forbidden from moving a single vehicle. They were just victims of strategic inertia.
The rage this produced was visceral. Field Marshal Rommel, commander of Army Group B, the forces actually defending the coast, he was reachable by phone. He had gone home to celebrate his wife's birthday, of all things.
The timing is just unbelievable.
He was furious. Rommel was perhaps the only senior commander who had consistently argued that the Panzer reserves needed to be closer to the coast, realizing that once the Allies landed, Allied air power would make moving reserves almost impossible.
He was proven right.
He slammed down the receiver after learning the Panzers still hadn't been released. His aide recorded his bitter understanding, capturing the terrible strategic weight of the moment. My God, they've done it!
Rommel understood that the window of opportunity, the only chance to stop the invasion, was closing hour by hour.
And Major von Locke, the reconnaissance commander who had identified the main effort.
He described his own rage at the absurdity of being forbidden from moving his battalion toward the gunfire, being forced to watch Allied gliders landing in the fields his unit should have been defending.
That feeling, that clarity of watching your own defeat unfold because your hands are tied, is profoundly tragic. It is. The atmosphere at von Rundstedt's headquarters shifted from shock to this terrible, bitter clarity. They were circling map coordinates they couldn't reinforce, calculating arrival times for reserves that weren't moving. A staff officer was overheard saying the chilling phrase, "We are watching our own defeat in real time."
Let's nail down that timeline, because this 6-hour window is the entire battle. General Marcks made the definitive call at 8:40 hours.
8 a.m., Hitler finally woke at 10 Wohl hours. He was then put through his morning routine.
His morning routine.
Yes. He wasn't fully briefed until 11 Wohl hours, and even then he remained highly skeptical that Normandy was the true invasion. He was still worried it was a feint.
Still obsessed with Calais.
Still obsessed with Calais. The first authorization to move those absolutely critical Panzer reserves, the 12th SS and Panzerlehr, was finally issued at 12 hours noon.
A full 6 hours had passed. 6 hours since the German army had achieved undeniable, perfect intelligence.
6 hours? That was the cost of the Führerprinzip and Hitler's paranoia. And we have to emphasize why this structural rigidity existed. It wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
Hitler had personally assumed control of all major Panzer deployment in March 1944. He did this because he believed his field commanders were too cautious or strategically inept, and he feared they would misuse his strategic assets, repeating mistakes like Stalingrad.
So he designed a chain of command that required verification up a slow, bureaucratic chain, corps to army.
Army to army group to OKW, and finally OKW to Hitler's personal staff.
And each level added delay. Each level required verification against the ingrained doctrine, the pas de Calais certainty.
And the final decision-maker was a man whose personal schedule and psychological rigidity made a rapid response impossible. They had optimized their command structure for a different, slower war, a war where the enemy would wait for them to respond.
The conclusion here is staggering. By designing a system focused solely on centralizing control and preventing internal political collapse, the nightmare of 1918, they had inadvertently created an army that couldn't respond to battlefield reality faster than the speed of bureaucracy.
They were technologically advanced, tactically competent, but strategically paralyzed.
By the time that Panzer movement authorization was finally issued at noon, the chance to destroy the invasion was already gone. This is where we tally the true devastating cost of those 6 hours of systemic paralysis.
It's a heavy cost.
What did the Allies achieve in those 6 hours? By the time the German tanks were even starting their engines, Allied forces had established critical footholds on all 5 Normandy beaches.
They'd landed approximately 156,000 troops, and in some key sectors like Sword had penetrated up to 10 kilometers inland.
10 kilometers, as a solid bridgehead.
Critically, the beachheads had successfully connected, securing the invasion perimeter. German paralysis cost them their one chance to destroy the invasion at its most vulnerable moment.
When they were wading through the surf.
Oh, exactly. When troops were wading through surf, when engineers were clearing obstacles, and before heavy armor could be properly offloaded and organized.
So Allied planners had estimated they needed, 48 hours to secure their position?
They did. And the German command structure gifted them the initial critical 6 hours they needed to survive any potential counterattack.
And when those counterattacks finally came, they didn't hit a disorganized beach. They hit reinforced positions backed by overwhelming Allied air and naval gunfire.
German field officers reported with terrifying simplicity, "We can't move in daylight."
Let's look at the fate of the key reserves. The 12th SS Panzer Division, the elite unit that could have turned the tide.
If it had been released at dawn, it could have struck Sword Beach by noon on D-Day, likely causing a catastrophe for the British forces attempting to break out toward Cayenne.
But instead,
it was authorized at noon, and because of the time required to mobilize, only began moving in earnest in the late afternoon and evening. It arrived piecemeal over the next 3 days, not as a coherent fighting force.
And that delayed movement meant they advanced under conditions of total Allied air supremacy.
It was a slaughter, a complete slaughter. Every road leading to the invasion zone was under constant, brutal attack. Tanks were obliterated by rocket-firing Typhoons and P-47 Thunderbolts.
The Jabros.
The dreaded Jabos, yeah. The fighter bombers. Supply columns burned continually. They couldn't move their fuel, their ammunition, or their repair kits. Infantry had to abandon mechanized transport and march exclusively at night, hiding in the forests during the day. Their efficiency was reduced by 90% simply by the environment the Allies had established in those first 6 hours.
And we have that tragic, deeply personal anecdote of Major General Wilhelm Thai, commander of the 91st Infantry Division.
Thai's story just perfectly personifies the systemic failure. He was racing back to his headquarters in a desperate attempt to issue orders and rally his scattered command.
Orders he should have been able to give hours earlier.
Exactly. He was killed by American paratroopers near the drop zones. His staff found his body with the maps and movement orders still in his command car. The man was rendered obsolete and killed by the very structural delay he served under. His tactical competence was strategically irrelevant.
The immediate military consequence was catastrophic, leading to the eventual grinding retreat. The Normandy campaign became a slow, inevitable collapse.
It did. By August, 50,000 German soldiers were trapped and annihilated in the Falaise pocket.
But the long-term psychological consequence was perhaps even more profound. The consensus among the surviving German officers who fought through Normandy was grim and uniform.
They all said the same thing. June 6th was the day they knew the war was lost. Not necessarily because of the Allies' material superiority. They had faced greater odds against the Soviets on the Eastern Front.
No, it was something else.
It was because their own system, their own political architecture, had rendered their tactical competence strategically irrelevant.
That sentiment is chillingly captured by General Günther Blumenried, Field Marshal von Rundstedt's chief of operations. He wrote about it after the war.
He did. He wrote in his memoir, "We knew on the 6th of June that we would lose the war. We just didn't know how long it would take." The second front had been opened, strategic depth had disappeared, and the two-front war was now an unwinnable race to the end.
The German officers spoke the correct words on June 6th. Das ist es. It was immediate, correct, and decisive.
It was perfect intelligence.
But their command architecture ensured that the very words of truth they spoke became nothing more than accurate descriptions of their own defeat. The Atlantic Wall, all the planning, all the doctrine. It all became irrelevant because the system designed to activate them couldn't operate faster than the pace of a sleeping Führer. This deep dive into the German perspective on D-Day reveals a fundamental lesson about decision-making, doesn't it? It is a story of perfect clarity running headlong into structural rigidity.
Exactly. Officers from Major Pluskat scanning the horizon at Omaha to General Marcks calling from St. Lo. They all spoke the right words at the right time.
They identified the invasion within hours and transmitted that understanding up the chain without distortion or delay.
The failure was systemic, not tactical. And the key insight for you, the learner, is the difference between seeing clearly and being able to act. The German army had the eyes to see the defeat looming. They diagnosed the threat perfectly.
But their hands were tied.
Their hands were tied by the Führerprinzip and a deeply ingrained culture that rewarded obedience over necessary life-saving initiative.
The costliest errors, whether in war, in business, or organizational management, they're rarely the ones made in ignorance, are they?
No, not at all.
They are the ones made with full, accurate knowledge, when the system itself is designed to prevent or fatally delay the correct response. Those 6 hours of bureaucratic inertia were more devastating than any Allied bomb.
And so, the words "Das ist es" echo through history. Not as a successful call to action for the reserves that should have moved, but as an epitaph for an army consumed by its own centralized authority.
That leads us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. In your own organizations, in your own teams, what critical truths, what definitive realities are being spoken clearly and accurately right now? That your systems, your meeting schedules, or your internal hierarchies are designed to ignore or fatally delay.
What crucial reports are being dismissed because the ultimate decision maker is, metaphorically, still fast asleep? That is the real cost of structural paralysis.
That is the deep dive for today. We thank you for joining us as we turn the historical lens to the other side of the beach and explored the words that couldn't save an empire.